Hello and welcome to this short presentation which is going to look at the topic of writing a business plan. This video will take you through all the key elements of a business proposal. It will also include some sorts of examples which you could look at and refer to help when producing your business plan. So let's take a look at the key content you'd find in a business plan. So your typical components of a business plan will be, firstly, you would set out your business idea and its unique selling point, sometimes called its USP. You would then have a section on your market research where you include your primary and secondary research. You would then set out your aims and objectives before explaining very clearly who your target market is. When we talk about target market, we mean the age, the gender, hobbies and interests, and maybe demographic data regarding who your potential customers may be. You would then set out the required resources. This could be physical resources, human resources, or financial resources. However, we'll cover the financial resources in more detail later. You would also have a section on your marketing and promotion. So how would you advertise your business and what methods would you use and what budget are you going to set for your marketing? We'd then have a section for your financial planning. So you would calculate your startup costs, you would calculate your operating costs, you would calculate your profit margins. So that would be your gross profit and your net profit. You would produce an income statement and you'd probably do a cash flow forecast as well as knowing about your break even. And finally, in your section at the end, you'd have some timelines to set out the plan, time it would take to open your business. You'd carry out any risk assessments, and you'd also show some elements of planning for things that can go wrong, something called a contingency plan. In this video, we're going to look at each of these sections separately, and we will also go into more depth regarding each section. So the first section in any business plan always sets out your business idea and your unique selling point, otherwise known as your USP. So your first section will tell me about your business idea. You will tell me what your product or service is that you're selling. You will tell me what's unique about your product or service. So you would list in detail maybe one or two elements that make it completely unique. You'd tell me where you're going to base your business, and you're going to tell me who your business is going to be aimed at. They're all key important aspects that you need to cover when we look at setting out the first section of your business idea. Now, to try and help you with this, I've created an example. So as you can see, I set it out with business idea at the top of the page. And then I've gone into telling the reader straight away what my business idea is. So paragraph 1 is all about telling you what my business idea is. And I've said that it's going to be an organic shop that sells honey called OH2U. And then I've gone and explained my unique selling point. So see the next sentence that I've got, which will specialize in the selling of fresh honey, which has come direct from the bees' hives based in the back garden of the shop. So there's a unique selling point. Then my next paragraph goes into location. So the shop will be located in the high street, as this is where most people visit on a daily basis. So what I've done there is explain why I've chosen that location. And then I've also gone to cover whether I'm going to be an online business, or I'm going to be basically electronically based, or I'm going to have a physical presence such as a shop. And I've said, as well as having a physical presence, I'm going to have an online presence via a website, which will allow customers from all over the world to order organic honey, which will be sent to them via mail order. So you can see there that I've already set out what my idea is, why it's unique, and how I'm going to sell my product. Now, because this is a business plan and I want to convince the reader that my idea is going to be viable and is going to be successful, I've decided to write a paragraph in more detail about my unique selling point. So you can see that I've gone and said straight away the unique selling point of OH2U will be the fact that all of the honey is 100% organic and is locally produced in the beehives in the back garden of the shop. So straight away I've re-emphasized that point. But look what I've done now. I've linked it to some market research. So I've gone from looking at my market research, it's clear that no other business specializes in the selling of this type of honey, and nobody makes honey in the local area. There will also be a click and collect service where customers can choose to use the website, which will enable people to order when they need honey and just collect when they're going past the shop. So you can see there, I've made it really clear about the fact that that's the unique selling point and that's where I've got it from. And I've also going to use my market research again to emphasize why this idea will be successful. So my next paragraph and my final paragraph in this section is basically saying my market research informed me that my target market will be women aged between 25 and 45 who have a middle to higher income and work as well as look after a family. So notice that I've got market research that's helped me to find out who my target market is. And I know that they are typically going to live within 5 miles of the shop and they will be near the local area. The online customers will typically be the same gender and age but live further away, but they may have connections to the local area and have an interest in organic honey. Again, you can see when you read this straight away, you know what my idea is, you know what the unique selling point is, you know who my customer is going to be, and hopefully you start to think, you know what, this might actually work. And that's what that section is all about, trying to convince you that it's going to work. So now we move on to the second section of our plan, and this is all about market research. Now this section of the plan needs to explain what market research have you done that convinces you and me, the reader, that your idea is going to be successful. So in your market research, you should have some research that shows you've looked at your competition. So you maybe look at their strengths and weaknesses and what products and services they sell. You should also have a collection of secondary research. Now remember, secondary research is research that somebody else has done. So it could be research from the internet, or it could be research looking at competitors' leaflets, for example, and newsletters, or even their financial accounts. And you should also have some primary research, and that should be the first-hand collection of research that you've done. So a questionnaire, or a survey, or even an observation study where you stood outside the shop that you're thinking of using and you've counted the number of people who walk past. And then you should summarize the findings of your research collectively. And you should be saying what impact this has on your business idea and what conclusions have you been able to reach. Remember, you're trying to convince me that your idea is going to be successful. To do that, you need to have some research to prove that's exactly the case. So let's start to look at an example of how I've actually done this market research section. So firstly, I've created a subsection called competition analysis. And I've made it clear to the reader that I've carried out some research of my competitors and I've looked at who they are and the strengths and weaknesses of each one. I've created a table, as you see below, and I've looked at the competitor's name, where they're located. So I've talked about where they are in relevance to my business idea. And then I've listed a load of bullet points for the strengths that business has got, and I've listed a load of bullet points for the weaknesses that business has got. Now, what I would have to do here is I wouldn't just do it for one business. I maybe would do it for 2 or 3 different businesses. And I'd also try and think out of the box. So, for example, yes, I'm an organic honey producer, but I've thought about supermarkets because they sell honey. I could also list the local corner shop, for example, there. If I was a fish and chip shop, for example, I might be listing the Chinese and Indian takeaways, as well as I might also list the supermarkets because they also sell takeout meals. So you can see that competition analysis is whatever you make it. You need to think about who you think your competitors are and then make it clear that you've done some research into them. Remember, you're trying to convince me that this idea is going to work. To do that, you need to show me that you understand your rivals, you know their strengths, but you also know their weaknesses. So now we're going to move on to the market research in detail, and we're going to start to look at the secondary research. So you can see there that I've created a paragraph which explains that I'm going to carry out some secondary research. I'm telling the reader what secondary research I'm going to use. So I've said that I've used the internet to find some market reports. If you don't know what a market report is, that's information around the market that I'm going to be operating in. So I've typed in, for example, into Google here, UK honey market statistics and sales of honey in the UK and number of customers that purchase honey in the UK. You get the gist. I've searched key terms and I found out some information. So I went onto one of the links and you can see here I found some bar charts which show me about honey, and I've also then summarized it in the bullet points. And at the bottom, most importantly, I've included a source where I got this information from. So you can see that I picked out that report that in 2013, UK buyers purchased 262 tonnes of organic honey. The UK was the second largest European market for organic honey after Germany, decreasing UK honey production by 25% and actually increasing demand for honey in the UK 54%. So you can see I've included those key stats. At this point here, I've done nothing else with them. I'm going to analyze them later. I've just put the key stats in there so that somebody can see them nice and easily. Now, the second part of my research is to make sure I conduct some primary market research. So you can see now that I've firstly set out to the reader what I've done. So I've done some primary market research. I've said I'm doing it in the local area, and I've said that I've used quantitative questions, so questions I can easily graph. Remember, qualitative questions collect feelings. Quantitative questions are closed questions typically, which you can graph. And I've said that I've done a questionnaire where I've got 50 people to answer the questions that I set. Now, what I've tried to say is there, I've sort of mentioned about sampling. So I've said to ensure that my results are accurate, I've made sure that I've chose people who are most likely to be my target audience. So in other words, I went and only asked people who looked to me to be between 25 and 45. So you can see that I'm trying to convince the reader that my market research is accurate. And now I'm going to gather a collection of data from my market research. So now I'm going to include the results of my questionnaire. So you can see there I've got a graph showing the gender. I've got a graph which will show the different age profile of people I asked the questions to. I've also got a question and obviously a graph on do they like honey. You can see I've asked that question. You can see that I said if you answered question yes, so say question 3 yes, then obviously how often do you purchase. Then I've got how much do you spend on honey typically. I've also got a question which said basically, would you buy locally produced honey? So you can see most said yes there. I've got where do you currently purchase your honey from? So I know where they're getting it from. I've also got a question which says, would you use the online delivery and would you want it delivered to home? And then last but not least, I've got a question here that says, where do you currently obviously go to basically look for your marketing information? That is the questions that I asked in my questionnaire, and I've graphed the data. Now, you've got choices here. You could write a little paragraph next to each one of those, sort of basically analysing what each graph actually shows, right? However, to be totally honest with you, I prefer to do my analysis afterwards. So I'd like to do it for a visual reader so they can look through it, and then obviously afterwards I'll write them some content that starts to assess what the data shows. However, if you prefer to do your analysis as you go, you can get a graph or a chart and you can make a comment next to it. So that one on the screen, for example, you might summarize what that's actually showing. That could also be good practice to use. That's a choice, but you want to set it out again so it's nice and easy for the person who's reading your plan to follow so that they can make quick decisions. Now, at the end of my section of market research, I'm going to summarize my primary and my secondary market research. So I'm going to pull it all together and then try and make it really clear to the reader what I've established. So you'll see that I've used statistics from the secondary research and I've used data from my primary research to support the case on why I believe my business idea will be successful. So you can see that in that first paragraph, without reading it all to you, that I've made a very clear point that because demand is falling, that's a real potential opportunity for me. And because we're the second largest purchaser of honey, then demand should be high, and that's great. And I've also gone to the primary research and talked about how that benefits me. Now, what you really would do is, boy, I've kept that quite short and concise. You're probably going to need to go into more detail because you maybe can't write as concisely as what I'm writing. However, you are summarizing the findings of your primary and secondary research. So you're telling the reader what that data is you collected, and you're making it clear how that benefits your business. And as a result of that data, what are you changing? Now, if your data maybe came back with something that you didn't necessarily expect to find, maybe you're going to make some changes or tweaks as a result of that data. However, this section, you're concluding your market research. So you're writing about basically what have you learned from that market research you've done. So now we move on to the section where we state our aims and objectives and our purpose for our business. So in this section, we need to make sure we make it really clear what is actually the purpose of our business. Why are you even setting it up? What do you want to get from it? So do you want to make a profit, for example? Do you want to make a difference to the community? What is the purpose of your business? You also need to state your aims. Now, remember, aims are your overall goals for your business. What do you want to get out of it? What are those goals that you want? And you need to state the objectives. So they're the things that are going to help you to achieve the aims. Now, your objectives should always be SMART. So that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. So you need to try and make sure that any objective you set helps to achieve an aim, but it forms part of that acronym SMART. So here is an example that I've created for you. So firstly, you can see I set up my purpose. So I said the purpose of OH2U will be to make a profit, and it's going to be in the private sector. So I've said that I want to make a profit, And because I'm in the private sector, so it's my money I'm investing, I want a return on it. So that's my purpose. I'm running this business to make a profit. And then I created a subheading, aims. And I said, I want to have the following 3 aims. So I want to break even by the end of year 1. So if you don't know what the word break even means at this point, break even is the point where I make no profit and no loss. So in other words, I want to get to a big fat 0, but that would be an achievement because I've not made a loss in my first year. So I'm happy not to make a profit, but I want to get to that big fat 0 and break even. That's realistic. Now, look what I've done for my second one. I've said to make a profit of at least £3,000 by the end of year 2. So by year 2, I want to make a profit. I no longer want to break even. And of course, I've set myself an aim of to be able to grow the business over 100 regular customers by the end of year 1. So I want to have 100 regular customers coming to my business by the end of year 1. Those are my stated aims. Those are my goals I'm working towards. And to do that, I need a set of objectives. So here are my objectives. Remember, my objectives will feed into my aims. Remember, they're going to follow that SMART model. So you can see, I've said straight away, to achieve the aims that I've set, I'm going to set the following objectives. So to attract 150 customers by the end of month 6 of operating. So I want 150 customers by the end of month 6. To achieve an average spend per customer per order of £5 by the end of the first year. To spend at least £500 on marketing and promotion of the business for the first year. And to take part in at least one local event promoting small businesses. So you can see that I've set those objectives, and every one of those objectives should help me to achieve the aims. Now, you could set this out slightly differently. If you wanted to, you could write the aim and then you could put the objectives that help you to achieve that aim underneath it directly. Or you can set it out like I've done there, where you set yourself some aims and then you set yourself some objectives that you're going to achieve in that year. But there's your section on aims and objectives set and done. Okay, so now we're going to move on to your target market. Now in this section, you're going to explain who are the customers, or the target markets I like to call them, who you're going to be aiming your products at. Now, the most important thing to think about here is that these are the people you're aiming at. It doesn't necessarily mean that people who are of a different age or a different gender won't use your business, but these are the people you specifically are aiming at. If you want to think about an example of this, think about ITV2, for example. ITV2 is aimed at young females, right? Because that's what they're aiming at. They don't mind if males watch it, and they don't mind whether you're older, for example, an older male or an older female, but they actually aim at young females, and they put them TV programs together to appeal to that target audience. So you're going to do the same with your business. Who are you going to actually aim your business at? Now, you need to think about the age of the person, the gender of the person, the location, so where they live or how far away they live from your business, their income. So are they going to be affluent, for example? That means quite well off. Or are they going to be an average income? Or going to be a low income? So that's where you might want to categorize it. And what interests and hobbies might they have that link with your business? So are they going to be interested in cooking, for example? Or are they being interested in being active and outdoors? Or are they interested in computer games? Because some of those interests you might be able to latch onto with your business idea. So here you can see an example. So I've got my target market, and I've said that my market research has informed me that my target market is going to be mainly females aged between 25 and 45 who have a middle to higher income, and they're going to work and typically look after a family. I've also said that I know they're going to live within 5 miles of the shop, and I know that the online customers will be the same sort of profile, but maybe live further away. And I've put that these people are going to be typically interested in being healthy, so I've linked that to the organic honey. And I've put they're probably going to have a fairly decent job, so they're going to have a fairly higher income, because to buy organic honey, that's probably going to be something that's going to cost you a little bit more money overall. So I've set out who my target audience and target market is. What I could do to add a little bit more depth there is do a little bit of analysis in that by saying this is great for my business idea because. However, I have actually set out my target market, and I've said who they are and what their interests are going to be. Okay, so now we need to look at the required resources. So these are going to be the physical resources, the human resources that you're going to need for your business. So as a result of this section, we should now know what you're going to need to set up the business, what equipment you're going to need to set up the business, also how many employees you need, what training, what skills they're going to need. So it should be very clear from this section that I know roughly what the cost of setup is going to be, and also what employees you're going to use and what skills those employees are going to have. Okay, so to do this section, you're going to need to look probably at the internet and do some research, because you're going to need to think about what items do you need and also get the figures for it. So, for example, you might want to use the Rightmove website to find out properties that are going to be for rent. Do a search for commercial property to rent, or you could do commercial property to purchase. Remember, it's a commercial building. Also, if you want a till, they tend to be called EPOS systems. So EPOS, electronic point of sale. Again, do a search for them, find out how much they are. Those can be some costs that you might want to include in your business. So my advice would be now is to make a list of all the startup costs you need. Now, startup costs are the one-off costs. The things you'll have to probably buy once, or the costs you're going to have to pay to get yourself going throughout the year. Now, in this case here, what I've done here is I've made a list of all the costs I'm going to need to get my business operating for a year. So I've got my shop, got the shelving, I've got the window display kit, I've got the till and card machine, got the beehives, got the beekeeping kit. You can see that I've listed how much it costs for one unit or per month, and obviously how many of those I'm going to need for the year. And obviously I've multiplied it across, and I've got a total cost of basically £10,054 for the first year's worth of trading. So to set the business up and to operate for 1 year, it's going to cost me that amount of money basically. Now remember, at this point here, I've not got any operating costs. They're just literally the startup cost to get me going for that first year. Now, if I put a source there, that's good practice to do that because it always shows where the data's come from. So once I've got a list of all the physical resources I need, now I need to make a list of all the human resources I need. So these are the people that I'm going to use in my business. So I've set out how many employees I expect to have, what courses or what training or what skills I expect them to have so they can do the job properly. And I've also mentioned basically what I'm expecting of them. So what do I want to see from them and what would I do to help them get those skills they maybe need. So you can see in those paragraphs there, I've set all that out. Now the next section, I go into a bit more detail about my human resources and where I've got them ideas from. So in this section here, you can see that I've worked out how much it will actually cost me to employ people to work in my business. So what I've done here is I've set up a little spreadsheet, as you can see on the table there, where I've worked out my possible opening hours, and then I've counted up how many hours the business will be open for. And then you can see that I've got 38 hours maximum per week. And then I've used the minimum wage, which I've set myself as paying £8.72. And I've basically got a part-time staff covering me for 22 hours. So then I've worked out what the total cost is going to be for that part-time member of staff. So in other words, it's going to cost me £9,975.68 to pay that part-time worker. Because, of course, I'm going to take my money out of the business as a salary. So I'm going to get a set amount of money. But that part-time member of staff is going to cost me that amount of money. Right? Now, you can see now I've started to calculate the cost of my business, how many hours I'm going to work, and it's starting to feel like a real plan now. When you start to read this, I'm getting an idea of whether this idea is going to really work. I now know that the person running the business is having a salary. I now know that the person they're employing is going to work 22 hours a week. I know what hours are going to work. I even know the reason why, for example, the hours are going to be lesser on certain days. So it's all starting to come together as a business idea. So now we're at the point where we can start thinking about planning our marketing and promotion. In other words, how are you going to advertise your business and how are you going to know basically that it's going to work and appeal to your customers? In this section, you need to tell me what method of advertising you're going to use. So, for example, TV, radio, newspaper, leaflets, social media. And you're going to tell me the cost of it. And you're going to explain why it's appropriate for your target audience. Now, think about this. If you're running a small to medium-sized enterprise, are you going to advertise on TV? Probably not. That's not going to be an appropriate method. Local radio may be an appropriate method, but it could be expensive. Again, think about newspapers. Rather than just saying newspapers, think about which newspapers you use. Is it going to be a local newspaper? Is it going to be a national newspaper? Remember, think about what's appropriate to your business size. You are normally going to be planning a small to medium-sized enterprise. There are many, many, many ways to advertise and promote. So don't feel because I've not mentioned one, it doesn't exist. You will probably know many more than even I could think of. Different forms of advertising and marketing, and it doesn't always have to cost money. And you're going to set it out in a plan. So your plan for marketing will look something like this. Now, I've created this in Excel. I've made a little table and I've set it all out, and I'll show you in more detail on the next slide. We can see it in more detail. But there is my plan for my marketing. I've also got a little bit of text where I've explained what my budget's going to be, and I've also said what time period I'm doing it for. So you can see that I've set myself a budget of £3,000, and I've set myself basically a 6-monthly time period. So that's what my plan is for. So let's have a look in more detail what the plan actually looks like. So here is an example of the plan. You can see that I've put the method down the left-hand side, and then what I've done is I've separated it by having a pre-launch, so basically the month before launch, and then obviously you've got the opening month, and then you've got month 1, 2, 3, 4, you go the way through. You can see that there. My final column is a source, so in other words, where I got the data from. And what you'll notice is that where I've got like newspaper, I've said what I'm going to do in the newspaper. What will that advert in the newspaper actually have? What's the message that's going into it? So at the pre-launch, what's the message? What's the message in the opening month, for example? And if you think about like the discount coupons, what discount I'm offering? Now you notice that I've actually duplicated it because the same offer is going to run every single month, apart from in the opening month. For social media, what am I doing with social media in each of those periods? So it might be I'm, setting it up, for example, or then I'm doing some offers, or then I'm doing a loyalty scheme or a share. So see what I'm doing? I'm telling you what I'm doing. And again, it comes back to making sure the reader knows what your plan is and is convinced that it's going to work. And that is what the marketing and promotion plan is all about. Make sure you've got a source, so I know where that data's come from. Really, really important. Now, I will go into more detail in a future video on the next section, which is all about finance and obviously contingency planning. I will make a separate video that explains that, and I'll create a resource that shows you how you can pull together some of the data to analyze and produce your financial forecasts. However, this should hopefully give you enough work to get started with and thinking about how to put together a comprehensive business proposal.